listen, I've been married a couple times and I have
What's
found
that like? I'm dying to know.
with prenups, I have found that they do not hold.
Oh, that's not true.
Okay, so tell me about it. What did I do wrong?
Prenuptial agreements are complicated. They're not simple agreements.
What are your thoughts on preventing, I guess, parental alienation?
Don't do that. It's just devastating. And boy, let me tell you, you are screwing them up for the rest of their lives. A lot of people really don't know what their financial circumstances are. I had a client who used to shop at Walmart and TJ Maxx thinking that they had really very little money. When she decided to pull the trigger and get divorced, she found out that the marital estate was $75 million.
Oh my, you're always hearing about divorces happening because now there is stuff on social media. There's text messages.
I had a client, her husband had an iPad, and on that iPad was photographs of his girlfriend and very revealing pictures. But that child that they had an iPad that was linked into the father's.
Today on Misunderstood with Rachel Yucatel, I'm honored to sit down with one of the most powerful and respected attorneys in the world of family and matrimonial law, Marilyn Chinitz. With over 35 years of experience, Marilyn has handled some of the most high-profile divorce and custody battles representing A-list clients like Tom Cruise, Michael Douglas, Wendy Williams, and a bunch of other names you would recognize. Beyond her legal brilliance, Marilyn has been married for an incredible 38 years, proving she doesn't just know how to navigate divorces, but also what it takes to make a marriage last. In this episode, we dive deep into what's misunderstood about divorce, prenups, parenting agreements, and protecting yourself legally and financially. Marilyn pulls back the curtain on the legal system, offering invaluable advice whether you're single, engaged, married, or going through a breakup. She also shares her perspective on the biggest mistakes people make in marriage and divorce and what you need to know before signing a prenup, and why having a great lawyer isn't just about fighting, it's about finding the right solutions. Marilyn is not only a legal powerhouse, but a voice of reason in a world where emotions often run high. This is an episode you don't want to miss, so enjoy my conversation with Marilyn Chinitz. Marilyn, thank you so much for joining me today on Misunderstood.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I loved seeing all the people that have been on your show.
Oh, yeah.
Identifying everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you recognize any of those faces?
I recognize a lot of people there.
Well, now, we are honored to have you on the show as well to talk about everything that's misunderstood about divorce and parenting and the law around it. So I want to get right into it. But first, I want people to understand a little bit of your background. I know from researching you, you weren't always interested in just becoming a matrimonial lawyer, and you came from, a different kind of law. Can you talk about how you got into law to begin with?
Oh, sure. I have... It's very interesting. It was serendipitous. I had no intention of going to law school, but I had two parents who were very focused on making sure that their three daughters were educated. And I was a little of a wild child, in the sense that I'd love to explore things. I'd like to travel. I'd like to do things. I'd like different types of people. And I think that made my parents a little nervous. And one day my dad came home from a dinner party that he attended with my mother. And he told me that he sat down next to this beautiful, brilliant woman who was a corporate lawyer. And when he spoke about her, his eyes lit up. And, he had so much respect for her. And I thought, wow, I'd never seen my father so ignited by a woman, professional, and how he communicated, how much he enjoyed speaking with her and so forth. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to show him that I can do the same thing.
Wow.
So I went to NYU undergraduate. I applied to law school, did not tell my parents. I needed money to file the application. And I was lucky because I had worked during college, so I had money. And I filed my applications, and then I got into a few schools. And when I told my dad that I got into law school, I saw that same beautiful excitement. And that's really what I wanted to accomplish. What child doesn't want to please a parent? And my parents were such amazing people. They had sacrificed so much for their kids. So it was such a great pleasure.
Mhm.
And then the trajectory after that has been spectacular.
Right. So you started in corporate law, right? And
Yeah.
what were your first couple, years doing that? What kind of things did you do?
So I started with a very well-respected law firm in New York as an intern while I was in law school and working on the first pay TV case. And it was a very, very big litigation. And I knew every single document in that file, and it was going to trial. And at the last minute, the client, who I knew quite well and spent a lot of time going through all the documents, said, "We're changing lawyers. We're going to another law firm. We would like for you to come with us." And I said, "Well, I'll come if you can get me a job there going forward."
Mhm.
And so they opened the door. I ended up, and the offer was to work in the corporate litigation. And so I did, and it was very interesting and very taxing, and then it became very boring for me. But it was very long hours, and my mentor was a gentleman with whom I'm still very, very good friends, who happens to live in Miami right now.
Oh, lovely.
But he retired many years ago. And then one day I was asked by one of the partners, quietly, to help him get his divorce resolved. And so I started to work with him, and I started to get more familiar and interested. And I thought, wow, this is a fantastic area of the law. Why? Because it touches on everything. It touches on, of course, personal things. And I admit to being a busybody when it comes to that. So I love the personal dynamic and the law, but trust and estate and tax issues. And we had to sell property, so it addressed real estate. So it seemed to touch on so many different areas of the law that I got really jazzed. And I said, you know what? I really want to do this. So I asked my mentor if I could present to the partner board, because they did not have a matrimonial practice. And back in the 80s, it really didn't exist in a big firm. It still doesn't exist in a big firm. Blank Rome was unique in that way. But I asked them if I could present, and they said, well, do a business plan and let us know why you think we should have a matrimonial practice. And I was in my 20s. I didn't even know what a business plan was, but I dug down and I found out how many cases we refer out for matrimonial, who we refer it to, and so forth. And then I came into the partner board meeting and I did a presentation. And we didn't have cell phones back then. So I got to present for like 10 minutes. That was it. And as I walked out, I get to my office and the phone rings. And my dear, wonderful Alan said to me, no, thumbs down. They're not going to do it. They think it's like ambulance chasing. And so I was heartbroken because I thought, what a great opportunity. And I left after a few months, and I went on my own and worked with a gentleman that I know who had an office. And I said, can I take space from you? And he said, yeah, of course. Well, this other firm, Finley, Campbell, Wagner, Heine, Underberg, and Casey, was sending me a ton of business. It was over my head. But I pivoted into the matrimonial world. P.S. That firm imploded and never survived.
Oh, wow.
And I did.
Right. So best
So
move
it's
you
a
could have
great
made.
story. And I
Yeah.
ended up doing exactly what I love doing, which is, matrimonial law. It's a great area.
So was it hard though for you to make that pivot? Did you have to learn completely new law? Did you have to go study it somewhere?
I was a baby.
Mhm.
So I was open to anything.
Yeah.
And I was always, a really hard worker. So that seemed to be the best entrance for me, which is you work hard, you're going to learn. I had great people to learn from. I really tried to attach myself to anybody I could that I thought that I could learn from. And the law is a lesson in progress. The more you do it, the better you are.
Right.
And if, I always say to my own kids, how are you going to be successful? Work hard, and work harder.
Right.
And that's the bottom line. So yes, there's a learning curve, but I was learning anyway. And I just implemented what I thought were the most important things. And that was to surround myself with good people, intelligent people, and do my work, do my research and so forth.
I'm curious, as a young woman starting in a new line of work in the matrimony law, how does somebody value like whether or not you're good, I guess, because it's not like other law where you either win or you lose, right? I mean, how
Well,
do
you
how did
do.
you
You
okay.
can, you're a trial lawyer, so you do win or lose. I try to negotiate settlements because I think that benefits everyone. How do you evaluate a good lawyer? I think the best way is references, people that you've worked with. That's how I get my business. And, because I've been doing this for over 41 years, I've represented a lot of people. I've come in contact with a lot of people, and they see you. They see you in court. They see how you argue. They see how you advocate for your client. And at the end of the day, when your client is happy, that client is going to share that news.
Right.
And that's how you build your practice.
Right. So I'm curious, in all the years that you've been doing this, do you see a common thread of why marriages are imploding and turning to divorces so quickly, or in such a way with there's so much animosity when they do happen?
Well, those are two different things. The animosity is really unfortunate, but people are emotional and they really have to learn to separate the emotion from doing a business transaction. Smart people look at it, unfortunately, in a dollars and cents way. Yeah. If you throw emotion in, sorry, I just got a coffee delivery.
That's okay.
If you throw emotion into it, your thinking gets distorted and you don't make the right decisions. And cases go on for a very, very long time unnecessarily because people are angry. I like to look at people and advise them. I know if somebody is ready for a divorce. I know when people come into my office and they're kind of on the fence. And that is a time for me to give them recommendations for good therapists. And I will say to them, I don't think you're ready. I think you need to really meet with a good therapist, explore what's going on, see if things can be fixed. And if they can't, I'll see you in 6 months or 9 months. I'm here. Right. And I have to share with you, some people do come back and others I'll get a call and say, thank you for that incredible referral. We're in therapy and it's working. And that's a great thing. Wow. So infidelity, of course, is a big thing. And probably one of the most difficult things to get over. Financial difficulties create a lot of stress in a marriage. Some people ride that wave and others don't. Financial success is another reason. And what happens is when somebody really eclipses the other spouse, outgrows them, they get bored, they get tired, and they're exposed to a lot of interesting people, and that exposure is very enticing. Right. So somebody gets left behind. And I think the bottom line is you've got to be a creative partner and spouse to keep a marriage going. And it takes a lot of work. And we don't think of it as work. You just think of it as, taking opportunities to do good things. Every marriage has its difficult moments. I mean, I married 39 years and I can count a lot of difficult moments. But it's what your tolerance level is. Is it somebody that is worthy of putting in that hard work? If it's an abusive relationship, a violent relationship, don't bother putting in that work. Get out as fast as you can. Right. What are your thoughts about people who stay for the kids? You hear that all the time. Well, that's an interesting thing. In my years, I think young kids adapt a lot better to divorce than when parents get divorced and the kids are older. Young kids are so busy, they just want to be in loving arms. Yeah. They want to go from one home to the other home, and as long as they're loving arms, they're happy.
Yeah.
They don't have that long-term memory. Older kids have different expectations. They grew up with their parents. Now they're going to college. Well, where am I going home to?
Right.
How come my parents aren't there? Where am I spending the holidays? And it becomes very confusing. And they're also old enough to formulate their judgment. Dad, you did a really crappy thing. You went outside the marriage, you lied to mom, or you hid money. So they could make judgment calls, and it's much more difficult for them. And at the end of the day, parents need to know they need to keep their kids out of it. The
Right.
damage that parents do to children is devastating.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
affects their relationships later on in life.
Yeah. I have a question about financial, like when somebody comes into you, you were talking about something earlier that made me think of this. Does it affect whether or not you want to represent them or how you represent them if they've come into it and you can tell that they are just out to get the other person, that they want to make sure that the wife doesn't get anything or vice versa?
I won't represent that person.
Right.
Plain off. If it's someone who is willing to lie or tells me that they diverted money or this is their scheme and they want me to participate in that, you are not my client.
Right. Okay.
It's just off limits, and I'll know right away. But that's rare. That's far and few between. Most people that I have dealt with, they may be hurt, they may be angry, but they're looking for fairness, whatever you define as fair, right? But engaging in tactics that are warlike, I think is a really it's a disservice to clients.
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time wasting money, getting people angry, driving a wedge, and I think that's a wrong way to practice. It's not the way I will practice.
Right. But I mean, you're obviously aware that there are so many lawyers that'll come out there, and no matter if their client's side is not correct, and it's obvious that it's not correct, they will just represent them to the end and fight for full custody, even though they shouldn't get it, and do all these terrible things.
I agree with you, and I think you have to counsel your client.
Yeah.
And if they're not going to listen to you, then you have a problem with the relationship. But look, you have to be creative in how you practice law. The law provides a lot of different, I don't want to say loopholes, but opportunities for you to get ahead or advance your client's position legally. It could be financial. Forget about custody. You should take those opportunities.
Right.
For example, if I want to get information, financial information, and the other side is not giving it to me, then you have other mechanisms to go about that. You can serve subpoenas, you can serve depositions, because you have to get that information and you have to navigate how you're going to get it so that your client is able to make a decision that's right for them. You're not going to sit on your hands. You're going to be aggressive in litigation to the extent that you are exercising your client's rights, but you're not going to cross the line. If a client should not have custody because they're drinking, because they're out all the time, you say, that's just not going to benefit your kids. Let's come up with a different schedule. And if they say, I don't care what it is, this is what I want, and I want you to get it for me, we're going to part ways.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's not enough lawyers, I think, like you out there, because they just want the business, and I've seen it so many times.
You make more money as a lawyer when you give people the right advice. There were so many times in my career where I've represented wealthy husbands, and I will say, give that extra amount. Do this. It doesn't cost you anything. You're going to make 10 times more in the next month. And uniformly, they will close the deal. They will come back and they will say, that was the best advice. Yeah. Because otherwise the case would be lingering for another year or 2 years. And you know what? People get sick in that level of toxicity and stress. I've had clients who have been in litigation for many years, unfortunately, whether it's the matrimonial or commercial or whatever the different litigations that they've been involved in. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, they've gotten sick with cancer.
Oh, wow.
You have to make a decision in life. Are you going to fight for 50% of everything? Or if I say to you, I'm going to give you $100 million tax-free lump sum. It's not 50%, but you will never spend that money in your lifetime. What deal are you going to take?
Yeah. Right.
And that's a decision that people have to make.
Let me be honest, I hate drinking water. It's plain boring, and I've never been the kind of person who naturally drinks enough of it. But I also know how important hydration is, so I've been on the hunt for something to make it easier, and that's where Field of Greens comes in. I started adding scoops of Field of Greens to my water, and suddenly I'm actually enjoying it. It tastes great, gives me a boost of real fruits and veggies, and makes me feel good about what I'm putting in my body. Plus, I've recently started adding the collagen, which has been a game changer for my skin, hair, and overall wellness. Now, instead of dreading my water intake, I actually look forward to it. And right now, it's your lucky day because Field of Greens is having a huge St. Patty's Day sale. Get 30% off when you use code LUCK at checkout. That means you can stock up on all their amazing flavors and bundles while saving big. Look, we know we all don't eat as healthy as we should, but one glass of Field of Greens is packed with a rainbow of doctor-selected fruits and veggies to support heart and kidney health, metabolism, and more. So even if you're grabbing a burger instead of a salad, you're still giving your body the nutrients it needs. So don't miss out. Again, go to fieldofgreens.com and use the code LUCK for 30% off. That's fieldofgreens.com, promo code LUCK. We all know staying active and tracking our health is important, but let's be real. Finding a smartwatch that's both powerful and stylish without costing a fortune, that's rare. That's exactly why I'm obsessed with AMAZFIT Active 2. Unlike overpriced competitors that force you into expensive ecosystems, AMAZFIT gives you more without the premium price tag. This isn't just another fitness tracker. It's a high-tech training partner designed for achievers who want real performance insights. While some brands give you basic step counts, AMAZFIT Active 2 goes way beyond. It's 160 plus workout modes, including Hydrox race mode and smart strength training. Features you won't find on most big name wearables. AI-powered coaching that personalizes your workouts based on your real-time performance and recovery so you train smarter, not harder. Free offline maps with turn-by-turn directions, perfect for hiking, traveling, or exploring without relying on Wi-Fi, and up to 10 days of battery life. Because who wants to charge their battery every night? I love how it tracks my heart rate, my sleep, and even respiration while giving me the insights I need to optimize my health. Whether I'm hitting the gym, going for a run, or just keeping up with my daily steps, this watch is keeping me motivated and on track. Right now, you can get 10% off your AMAZFIT Active 2. Just head to amazfit.com/understood and upgrade your fitness game today. That's amazfit.com/understood. amazfit.com/understood for 10% off. Yeah.
It would be nice to make a decision about receiving $100 million, right?
Yeah, I was going to say you're dealing with people with a different level than I think the average person, right? But there are so many people that are in marriages and they'd like to get out. But what you were talking about before, where they're on different playing fields, whether or not one spouse all of a sudden came into a lot of money, they fall out of love, there's infidelity involved. A lot of people I know have stayed in marriages because they don't have any options. They haven't had a job in 15 years. They don't know what they're going to do. What would your suggestion be to people like that? They don't have money to get a lawyer and they don't know what their options are because they feel so stuck.
That's a real problem. And if it's a question of one spouse having control over the money, but there is a marital estate that's significant, there are lawyers who will say, borrow that initial retainer and I'll subsidize the case for a while. I'll make an application to the court to get you legal fees, but they will have the opportunity to have representation. A lot of people are comfortable in their lives. They have the country club membership. They go to lunch. They can go out with friends. They come home to a miserable marriage. But they've made the decision that I'd rather do that than now fend for myself.
Right.
But in a lot of cases, if you're going to get a distribution of assets, that divorce could be very liberating.
Yeah.
And it's not just a negative. It could also be a very big positive for women in particular. I mean, I've had women who just having the emotional freedom has given them their lives back. So in very controlling relationships, where they have no say, they're minimized, they're marginalized, and they're so disrespected in their marriage that their whole personality just crumbles.
Right.
And then as they pursue divorce and they find out what the marital estate actually consists of. I had a client who used to shop at Walmart. She lived in a beautiful house in Greenwich, Connecticut. She used to shop at Walmart and TJ Maxx thinking that they had really very little money. When she decided to pull the trigger and get divorced, she found out that the marital estate was $75 million.
Oh my God.
She had every single expense was monitored.
Oh.
And to see her now, the freedom that she has, what she can do, it's like you gave this person a whole new life.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. A lot of people really don't know what their financial circumstances are.
Right.
And it's really important for people to partner up early. Don't be blind. Don't put your head under the sand. When a statement comes in, don't say, here, honey, your statement came in. Open it up.
Right.
See what's there. Educate yourself as to what you have.
Right.
And to me, that's one of the most important things, because that makes your relationship important and powerful. You're on equal level playing field. You're not like this.
Yeah.
And so you deserve respect, and you should gain the respect, and you should assert yourself.
Right.
So educate yourself.
Right. I agree with you. All right, let's talk about prenups for 1 second. I mean, listen, I've been married a couple of times. And I have found.
What's that like? I'm dying to know.
Well, we'll get into that in a second because I want to talk about New York law as opposed to others, what we sort of talked about earlier. But with prenups, I have found that they do not hold water.
So that's not true.
Okay, so tell me about it. What did I do wrong?
That's not true at all. Look, there are key components. You have to have representation. Each of you have to have an attorney. You can't share an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have full disclosure of all the assets. You have to have an opportunity to review the agreement, not last minute. And it has to be a fair, reasonable agreement without unconscionable terms.
Mm-hmm.
If you meet all those elements, the court is going to uphold that agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's a bad agreement, everybody's entitled to make an agreement as long as they had counsel, disclosure, and opportunity to negotiate. You have the right to make a bad agreement or a good agreement. But the courts are inclined most often to enforce an agreement as long as those terms have been met. Where they don't is if it's unconscionable.
Mm.
And what does unconscionable mean? It means shocking to the conscience. So where a woman marries a man who's worth $20 million, and he said, you're waiving your rights to my business, you waive your rights to the marital home, you're waiving your rights to support, you get $25,000 for every year that we're married, capped at $1 million. Against or capped at $500,000. She has no ability to earn money. She waives support against his massive amount of wealth in a long-term marriage. A court's going to say, wow, this is patently unconscionable, not unfair, but unconscionable, because she leaves the marriage with $75,000, $100,000, a minimal amount. We're not going to enforce that agreement. The courts like, as a matter of public policy, to enforce private agreements among parties, as long as they were protected.
Right. So the experience that I had was, and And again, we're not talking about anyone that was worth $20 million, but the issue was with the wording. And I'll just tell you what one part of it was that my daughter, who was very young at the time, as she got older, I put her in private school and he was supposed to pay for the school. And because the judge didn't, he didn't want to pay for it now. And the judge felt that the wording wasn't specific enough, even though it really stated it in there, but they were able to argue something. And so it ended up being what the judge came down with was that unless it was proven that I had 12 years of finances in my bank account, enough to pay for private school, she could not go to private school because he, was saying that he didn't have enough money for it, which I thought was crazy.
So that's drafting, right? That and the art of drafting is critically important.
Okay.
I was just helping somebody who lives down in Miami, who's represented by counsel, and she said, "Could you just eyeball this and tell me if this is a good stipulation?" And I read it, and it had so many openings. It had, like lingering. And I said, well, what happens if this occurs? What happens if that occurs? None of those things are defined in the agreement. And practicing law is the art of drafting. And it's very specific and it's very nuanced. And if you don't write it correctly, there's no opportunity to interpret. It has to be very clear. Once you open the door for an opportunity for interpretation, it's a 50-50 risk.
Right.
And when you have a contract, you want it sealed. And so drafting becomes really, really important. And prenuptial agreements are complicated.
Mm-hmm.
They're not simple agreements. They're agreements where, for example, you define what's separate property, what's marital property. If you don't have a prenuptial agreement, but you come into the marriage with separate property, what you're exposed to is if your separate property grew over the marriage, your spouse can claim that appreciation is marital. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. If you came into the marriage, Rachel, with a bank account, it was yours. You had it for many, many years, and it had a significant amount of money. It was a brokerage account. And the man that you married was a trader. He said, you know what? Let me manage this account. I'll make it go up in value. But it was your separate property. Mm-hmm. And it goes up exponentially. If you had a prenup agreement, your agreement would say, my separate property and any appreciation in value, even if contributed by you, will remain my separate property. If you don't have a prenup, then your separate property, what you came into, gets valued as of the date of marriage. Mm-hmm. But if it went up in value as a result of the direct contribution of your spouse, he or she will make a claim that there's a marital component and ask for a percentage of that appreciation. Mm-hmm. So prenups can be very important, but drafting them meticulously is even more important.
Yeah, that's great advice. There are so many people that I know that when right before they get married, they are given a prenup and they're so offended or their family is offended that it actually ends to the marriage not happening. So in your opinion, do you think it's just really important to have one, or do you think that's preemptively saying, I don't believe this marriage is going to really work?
It gets very complicated, and it gets to be a very ugly situation because these people are getting married. They want to move on with their lives. But if one of the parties comes from an extremely wealthy family and insists on a prenuptial agreement, and the other spouse, the spouse-to-be, refuses to sign and said, I find it so offensive. I don't want your money, but I don't want to sign a prenup. The family is going to put a lot of pressure on that family member not to get married. Mm-hmm. Why? Because there's a lot of risk. This couple didn't earn the money. It was earned by other people.
Right.
Right? And so I do believe that money that you earn during the marriage should be marital. It should be a marital partnership. But money that was gifted or that you inherited or that you came into the marriage should remain your separate property, including the appreciation. It's unfortunate when that happens, and it's actually very heartbreaking because the couple could really be in love and very happy, but you have outside forces that make it impossible.
Right.
But it's happened.
Yeah. I want to go back to talking about judges for a second. Do you think that judges these days are good at being impartial and really listening to the facts, especially within family court? Or do you think that it is possible that they rule once in a while based on who they like better?
They're all human. Let's start off with that premise, right? They're all human. They come into a situation where they're neutral, but then they hear the behavior of one against the other. And of course, their opinion gets colored, influenced, I should say. But judges are neutral. It's how the lawyers present the facts to them. And the judges will form their opinions based upon the facts and the law. So it's what you give to the judge and how effective you are that will form the judge's opinion. I think the judges, they try to do their best. They work hard. The problem is that the court system is inundated. There are not enough judges. They're overwhelmed. And it's hard for them to get decisions out. So what happens then? What happens is divorce cases go on longer than they should. They're very frustrating because you can't get a decision quickly and you're in a state of limbo, and that's really hard. So what I often recommend is either mediation or private judging. And because the courts recognize how overwhelmed they are, they have now implemented programs, ADR, they're called alternate dispute resolution programs, where they have former judges who mediate these cases, and they're hugely effective. But again, you don't want to get bogged down in a court system that's not going quickly. You want to find the most expedient way to dispose of your case, because it wreaks havoc on people and families.
Yeah. You were talking before we were on air about how in California it's legal to have these private judges and not yet so in New York City, correct?
No. It's legal in New York, but it's a different process.
Oh, okay.
So in California, you have different organizations. One of them is Signature, it's called. And you have retired judges, and they will mediate and they will also try cases. In New York, you have a lot of retired judges. They're doing arbitration, they're doing mediation, and in some cases, they're trying cases. But it goes back to the original judge to rubber stamp the decision, so to speak.
To sign it off, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a difference between mediation and arbitration. Arbitration is binding. That means when that retired judge makes a decision in your case, it's binding. You've waived the right to appeal. I generally do not like that process. I like a client to be able to have the right to appeal. In mediation, the retired judge is not making a final decision. They're doing a diplomatic dance, so to speak. They're trying to meet both parties in a way that gets them to mediate. And they have a lot of influence because they say to the litigants, listen, I sat on the matrimonial bench for 30 years. I'm going to tell you how the judge is going to come out on this. You're going to be spending a lot of money, and at the end of the day, the decision I'm recommending to you is where the judge is going to come out.
Right.
And that has a lot of force. It has a lot of powerful effect on a litigant. But yes, I think every case should go to mediation. I think every case should be tried. You should try to settle it.
Right.
Before you
it goes into somebody else's hands. Yeah. I mean, you take the power back when you're trying to mediate as opposed to giving it to someone else like a judge.
Without a doubt. I mean, do you want a judge who you're never going to see again to make the most important decisions in your life?
No,
or do you want to be part of the process and help influence that decision. I think the latter answer is uniformly the answer everybody will say.
Yeah. You said arbitration, which reminds me of NDAs. And I'm curious how often you see NDAs wanting to be signed during a divorce.
Well, certainly at the end of a case, you're going to see an NDA.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see confidentiality agreements at the beginning of a case if there's a lot of financial information that cannot be disseminated and needs to be protected. And that's a very important issue because in matrimonial cases in New York, they're sealed. Unlike California, unlike Connecticut, where when you file, you see everything. New York cases, they're not. But people play dirty tricks and they may bring a separate case that's parallel to the matrimonial, and they do that for a tactic where they disseminate very private personal information that they couldn't disseminate in the matrimonial. I think that is a tactic that is offensive, unprofessional, and ends up hurting both parties in the end.
Right.
But confidentiality agreements are really important because why should the public know about very private, specific information? What reason do you have to disseminate that information except to harm another party?
Right.
So always suspect for me when the lawyer on the other side is opposing an NDA. Why? Why wouldn't you protect the information? Why do you want to disseminate it? Who do you want to hurt?
Right.
So I think they're important.
What are your thoughts on preventing, I guess, parental alienation and making sure that after this heated, divorce is finally ending and you're coming up with a parenting agreement, that it's something, again, and I'm talking about a lot of people that are listening, let's say, we're not talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So it's the average person dealing with an average divorce with a lot of emotion. And with that comes parental alienation.
Yeah, don't do that. It's just devastating. Don't do that. As tempting as it is to manipulate the situation by making your children the center of the conflict, they are collateral damage. And boy, let me tell you, you are screwing them up for the rest of their lives. What are you doing? You're making them insecure. You're making them anxious. You're making them depressed. You're making them have negative relations with the people that really love them. You're cutting them off from relationships, whether it's grandparents, aunts and uncles, people that are going to be nothing but kind and loving to your children. And I can't say it strong enough and loud enough. It's like taking a loaded gun and shooting at your kid. Nobody would do that.
Yeah.
But your words and your behavior is so damaging. You got to stop it and grow up and find another way to focus your issues with your spouse. I've seen it. I think it's such a horrible weapon. And the court system tries to put things in place. I like recommending parent coordinators. I like recommending family therapy so that you have not the court system, but an independent person with whom you work. I had a couple. They've been in divorce litigation for over a year. They have not spoken, not one word. They have 3 kids. You can't not communicate. And so I got the other side. I spoke to the attorney and I said, look, there's a really good parent coordinator. She's a therapist. She's excellent. And I can't tell, they ended up both agreeing to go. I can't tell you how everything has changed so dramatically, where there's still hostility, but there's communication and things are getting accomplished and we're agreeing on schedules and we're agreeing on vacations and we're agreeing on access, and it makes a huge difference. There are so many available things for a party to do to help facilitate resolution, communication, instead of taking it out on your children.
Right.
And you've got to do it. And bottom line is you need the best counsel available because it's all about being in the right hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's everything.
I was thinking of something earlier when you were talking about trial. And I guess it could even be when you're going to arbitration or mediation, you spend a good amount of time with your lawyer who's telling you how to represent yourself in those proceedings, which is be quiet, keep a straight face, whatever it is that you're counseling them on. And that is a big part of that conversation before you go to trial or the arbitration. Can you talk a little bit about what you want to see out of your client?
So the truth, right? The truth is the number one thing.
But even just sitting next to you, isn't it important?
Yeah, but experts know when you're not credible. And when they're sitting next to me and they're being asked a question, you always have to tell the truth. You know, one thing about telling the truth, you never forget the truth.
Right.
When you listen to people who lie, and then they come up with another story, and then they come up with, because they forgot the original story. So that's why that it's a lie.
Right.
So it's very important for the client to be deferential. If you represent a client, a male who's, angry and expresses it and somewhat of a bully, you better pull him back down on a seat. And so what this process has to be is respectful, deferential, and cooperative. And that's the key word. So any explosions, they don't work. Most often the clients really don't speak. The attorneys speak, but there are times when their voice needs to be heard.
Right.
And they have to have their day in court, so to speak. But I spend a lot of time with my clients. For every court appearance, we go over everything. I prepare in the most complete way, and I make sure they understand what to expect when we get to court. Preparation for depositions when they're going to be examined under oath for 7 hours. And that's where I say, you gotta tell the truth.
Right. But what about even in those moments where they have to listen to the other side and that they're just like wanting to burst out of their seat and say that's not true, or they can't listen to all the things that are happening across the way, right? What do you say to your clients about being
there's a time and place for everything. You have to let the other side talk.
Right.
But you also have to be very strategic in how you respond. So what I say is write down the list, bullet point. When the other side says something, if it's not true or accurate, just bullet point. And then after their presentation, we take a break. I talk to my client and I say, give me this specific example so that we could respond back. But not just he said, she said. What proof do you have there? Do you have a text message? Do you have any communication that says just the opposite? Right. And so it's all about communicating. You don't want people to go, oh my God, there's so much noise, I don't want to hear them. You're far more effective if you speak in a way that's strong, direct, responsive, because you're going to lean in and listen. If you're going to start, no, I never said that, everybody's turned off already. So it's communicating is so, so important. If I want to tell my husband, who I married 39 years, something that really bugged the hell out of me, I'm going to find a way to make a joke out of it so that we dispel the kind of angry tone. Doesn't always work, but I'm going to try. Humor is a great way to bring the temperature down. Right. And you can say to somebody, wow, what movie are you in? Because that doesn't even remotely resemble what happened, but I'm going to have a good laugh. Right. So it's how you communicate. And I think that's really, really important. Makes the difference of winning and losing. Yeah.
You've represented so many famous people. The news cycle in pop culture is, you're always hearing about somebody getting a divorce, and you're always hearing about divorces happening because now they're is stuff on social media. There's text messages. There's women coming out that are saying your
There's
husband slept with
AI.
me. Yes. Well, there's that too.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But do you see in a lot of your divorce cases now the fact that there's so much social media involved, or women coming
Tremendous.
out of nowhere and saying, I've been with this man for years? How do you deal with that?
Tremendous. I mean, social media has its positive and it has its negative.
Right.
My clients have tracked their spouses traveling in Europe, or somebody with whom, not the immediate person, but friends who were there, showing their Instagram with the other couple there holding up a new Birkin bag, and all of a sudden information and evidence starts rolling in. And people don't realize that when you post something, you let it go, it's out there.
Yeah.
And it can have very damaging effect. I had a client who had her husband had an iPad, and on that iPad was photographs of his girlfriend and very revealing pictures. But that child that they had an iPad that was linked into the father's.
Oh.
And all of the pictures came up that the mother saw, before really the child was able to glue their eyes on it. Social media can be very dangerous. Electronics can be very dangerous. I've had clients who were the victims of recording devices sewn into their jacket, recording devices that were sewn into their briefcase, a pen that had a recording device in the car, in the bedroom, in the suitcase, everywhere. Now, is it legal? Is it an offense? That's a whole nother topic. You have to be very, very careful. You can't go on your spouse's computer if it's a business computer. That's a felony offense. Social media is great for fun and terrible for divorce.
Right. Yeah, I agree. What, in your opinion, do you see as the future of divorce law? I mean, when you got into it, you were saying how it was a very, small department sort of in law firms, and now everybody's getting a divorce. So what, and everybody wants a really good divorce attorney. So what are your thoughts about the future of it?
I think, I love our model. I'm a partner at Blank Rome. We've got 16 offices across the country. We do corporate, real estate, tax, insurance. I like that model because when you go through a divorce, you need to have the best representation, and you need to consult with all of these different other areas of the law. Look, I hope that we don't roll back our laws. Idaho is now trying to pass a law rolling back same-sex marriage. And if you remember, President Biden implemented the Respect for Marriage Act. And that was implemented in case there is a rollback. If you are recognized as a married couple in New York and you move to Texas or a state that may not recognize that same-sex marriage, under the Respect for Marriage Act, that state must recognize that marriage. That wasn't the case before. And so I'm hoping that doesn't roll back. I'm hoping that we don't see a rollback going to fault divorce, which is what some of the very conservative states are looking for. They don't like the way divorces are so easily obtained. So now they want to start implementing what we had years ago, which is that you had to prove grounds for divorce. Adultery, cruel and inhuman treatment, which I think every marriage has cruel and inhuman treatment. I mean, just a question of what degree. And if we see that coming back to our statutes, we're going to have a lot of problems, because it means that people are going to stay in potentially abusive relationships because they won't necessarily have the grounds. And it's a rollback of rights that I hope we don't see. So when you ask me, what do we see in the future? I'm hoping we see more private resolutions as a way to get things done. Save your money for your kids, right? Lawyers are expensive, and let me tell you, do I love writing, issuing bills that are so high? No, I really don't. You want to get done. You want to give your client value. If they're paying this and they're getting that value, that's not a good ratio. Mm-hmm. If they're getting great value and they're paying a lower amount, then you've done a good job. Yeah. But it takes everybody to get to that result, not just one lawyer. It takes the other side and both parties to cooperate in that level.
Right. Well, Marilyn, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much. Please let our listeners know where they can find you if they want more information or if they would like to, request your services.
Okay. So I'm in New York, Blankrome, Blankrome. I'm a partner there. You can go on my website. You'll see my email address, and I'm more than happy to connect with any of your viewers or listeners. And it was really, Rachel, great pleasure. You asked fantastic questions, and an hour went by in 2 seconds.
I know, it was really fun.
That's a good sign.
All sorts of things. And I don't know if I want to say, hopefully maybe we'll work with you in the future, or hopefully I won't, but.
Well, I hope maybe we have lunch together.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that. So
come to New York.
I will. I was a pleasure meeting you. You got to come to Palm Beach and come out with me and all your friends here.
I love San Ambrose. I love that. That's great. I love all the restaurants here. It's a lot of fun.
It's so fun here. So
I went to the Carriage House for a party, which was great.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the Everglades, which was also fabulous.
Of course. Yeah. A beautiful place to be. Well, you have an open invite. I will see you in New York. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Misunderstood. I'm your host, Rachel Yucatel. Please be sure to subscribe to the show and give us a 5-star rating and review. You can support the show by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/misunderstood with Rachel Yucatel. Do you have ideas for the show or want to reach out? Email us at info_misunderstoodpodcast@gmail.com. That's spelled MISS understood. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.